Second and final sound check. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. You won't hear anything, James, because it's not on it. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is everyone happy? Any objections? Cool.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Prince Reza Pahlavi's press conference. I'm just going to give you a few bits of housekeeping before we kick off. The Prince is going to speak and give some introductory remarks. We're going to then have question and answers. He'll take questions in English, French, or Farsi. We're going to have about 20 or 30 minutes of questions. When you ask a question, could you give your name and organisation? Thank you very much. We're just about to kick off right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the International Press Corps, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. This is a historic moment for our nation. I will begin with a brief message to my compatriots in Iran in Persian, which I will then translate. هم میهنان، ایران عزیز ما به جنگی کشیده شده که بانی آن شخص علی خامنه‌ای و فرقه تبهکار و ویرانگر اوست. او اقتصاد کشور را به ورطه نابودی کشانده، زیرساخت‌ها و منابع ملی را به تاراج برده، ثروت ملت را برای ساخت سلاح هسته‌ای هدر داده، امنیت ایران را در هم شکسته و حاکمیت ملی را از ملت ایران ربوده است. این رژیم شکست خورده، در لبه پرتگاه فروپاشی است و دیگر نباید ادامه پیدا کند. زمان پایان دادن به این تباهی و آغاز دوران نوین ایران است. زمان طلوع دوباره شیر و خورشید ایران. My fellow compatriots, our beloved Iran has been dragged into a devastating conflict, the architect of which is none other than Ali Khamenei and his corrupt, destructive faction. He has driven our nation's economy to the brink of collapse, plundered our national infrastructure and resources, squandered the nation's wealth on developing nuclear weapons, shattered Iran's security, and stolen the sovereignty of the Iranian people. This regime is defeated, teetering on the edge of collapse, and must not be allowed to continue. The time has come to end this ruin and begin a new era for Iran. This is a new dawn for Iran's lion and son. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past few days, I have spoken with people across Iran from every walk of life. An officer in the armed forces, a mother fleeing Tehran, a factory worker from Tabriz, a young woman, activist for the Women Life Freedom Movement. These voices represent a nation embattled but resilient, that is not asking for its freedom, it is fighting for it. From the 1999 student protests to the Green Movement, to the 2017 Dema and 2019 Aban Mah uprisings, thousands of Iranians have given their lives in the fight for Iran's liberation. Today, millions of my brave compatriots continue the fight. One of their stories moved me deeply. In September 2022, Javad Haidari was murdered protesting the Islamic Republic's killing of Mahsa Amini. His sister has continued his fight. She is one of the hundreds of activists the regime has arrested and harassed in recent days. When security forces raided her home, she cried out, "Oh God, where shall we go? Where shall we go to flee from your tyranny?" One by one, her neighbors began to respond to her, "We're not going anywhere. They," meaning the regime, "are the ones who've got to go." These words echo in my heart and should echo in every corridor of power around the world. Today, it is clearer than ever. The Islamic Republic is collapsing. Credible reports indicate that Ali Khamenei's family and the family of senior regime officials are making preparations to flee Iran. The regime is on its last legs in towns and cities across the country. The military is fractured. The people are united. The foundation of this 46-year tyranny are shaking. This is our Berlin Wall moment. But like all moments of great change, it comes fraught with danger. We stand at a crossroads. One road leads to bloodshed and chaos, the other to a peaceful and democratic transition. The difference in these two roads depends on one factor, and one factor alone: whether the current regime in Iran is allowed to survive. If the West throws the regime a lifeline, there will be more bloodshed and chaos, because this regime will not submit or surrender after it has been humiliated. It will lash out. As long as it is in power, no country and no people are safe, whether on the streets of Washington, Paris, Jerusalem, Riyadh, or Tehran. There is only one way to achieve peace: a secular, democratic Iran. I am here today to submit myself to my compatriots, to lead them down this road of peace and democratic transition. I do not seek political power, but rather to help our great nation navigate through this critical hour towards stability, freedom, and justice. To the people of Iran, I see your courage, I feel your pain. I know you are suffering. I know many of you are afraid for your loved ones, your children, your future. So I speak to you today with a heavy heart. I worked for years, for decades, so that the scourge of war would never reach the borders of our land. Seeing the images of the people of Tehran forced to flee our beautiful capital, the explosions in Isfahan, the fires along the Persian Gulf, all fill me with pain. But more than pain, I am filled with anger, because this war is the result of the selfishness, hatred, and terror of one man, Ali Khamenei. While he directs this war from the safety of his hidden bunker, he uses our people as human shields. It is time to end the suffering. So today, I have a direct message for Ali Khamenei. Step down, and if you do, you will receive a fair trial and due process of law, which is more than you have ever given any Iranian. To other senior regime officials, those of you whose hands are soiled with the blood of the Iranian people, You too will have to face justice. But we will not repeat the mistakes in other failed transitions. To those of you who are loyal to the Iranian nation and not the Islamic Republic, there is a future for you in a democratic Iran. If you join the people now, the choice is yours to make. I know these officers, these soldiers, these brave men exist because they are reaching out to me and telling me they want to be part of this national salvation. But now, greater coordination is needed. So to that end, today I am announcing that I am establishing a formal channel for military, security, and police personnel to reach out directly to me, my team, and our expanding operation. This is a secure platform to efficiently manage the growing volume of inbound communications and requests from those breaking with the regime and seeking to join our movement. For those patriotic members of our armed forces, the time is now to join the nation. If you do, I will make sure your service to Iran is not forgotten and is celebrated. To the international community, now is the moment to stand with the Iranian people. Do not repeat the mistakes of the past. Do not throw this regime a lifeline. You are right to be concerned about stopping nuclear weapons and securing regional stability. Only a democratic transition in Iran can ensure these goals are achieved and are lasting. Take, for example, the destruction of Natanz, Esfahan, and Fordo enrichment facilities. Yes, this has diminished the regime's domestic nuclear enrichment, but it does not diminish the regime's intent to acquire and use nuclear weapons. The regime, enraged and emboldened, will be seeking revenge and can acquire nuclear weapons from other rogue regimes like North Korea. The destruction of the regime's nuclear facilities alone will not deliver peace, but the path I offer can. So work with us to ensure a peaceful transition. Now is not the time for hesitation. Now is the time for principled action from each of us. 46 years ago, when my late father and our family were forced to leave Iran, I took an oath to God and to my country. I would not turn my back on Iran or the Iranian people. Every day since, I have dedicated my life to my compatriots. And today, I am here to reiterate it and to put myself at their service. I am stepping forward to lead this national transition, not out of personal interest, but as a servant of the Iranian people. I have a clear plan for transition and national renewal. Our transition and future democracy will be based on these three core principles: Iran's territorial integrity, individual liberties and equality of all citizens, separation of religion and state. The final form of this future democracy we seek will be for the Iranian people to decide in a national referendum. What I offer is not just a vision for the future of our country, but the plan to execute a peaceful, orderly transition. To achieve that, today I am announcing the following initial steps. First, I will convene a National Unity Summit. This gathering will include activists, dissidents, and groups from across the ideological spectrum who agree to these three principles. it will not be limited just to political groups, but business leaders, professionals, experts, and other groups with influence across Iranian society. This summit's objective will be to agree on a roadmap for democratic transition and reconstruction. Second, in parallel to the democratic process, I am developing an economic plan to rebuild Iran. We have already launched the Iran Prosperity Project, a comprehensive plan for the economic reconstruction and social stabilization of our country in 3 phases. The emergency phase of the first 4 to 6 months, the establishment phase of 18 to 24 months, and the normalization phase, which is long-term. In the coming days, my team of experts will publish the plans for the first 100 days after the collapse of the Islamic Republic based on this work. We are bringing together some of the world's greatest investors, builders, entrepreneurs, and experts who care about Iran and see its immense potential. They stand ready to put in the expertise, the talent, and the capital to rebuild our nation and turn it into one of the world's most attractive markets. Imagine this new Iran, a free and democratic Iran, living at peace with our neighbors, an engine of growth and opportunity in the region, a beacon of culture, innovation, and pride in the world. It is within our reach. We are proud, ancient, resilient people. The task before us Iranians today is no less than the ones faced by the great leaders, the great unifiers, the great builders of our history, like Cyrus the Great. As we embark on the final steps of this path to national revival, to liberation, to peace, we continue to be inspired by him. To my compatriots, this is our moment. I am with you. Let us build this new Iran together. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Prince. We're going to take a few questions now. A few people are tapping on the shoulders. Stuart, may I have you?
Hello, this is Stuart Williams with George Shaw's Press in Paris. Thank you so much for coming here to speak to us directly. You made very clear in your remarks that you don't see power yourself, but you are ready to lead transition. As we're speaking now, quite rapidly, quite concrete terms, what function exactly do you envisage for yourself? Possibly as a temporary president, as a prince even, Shah? Maybe it's time to start to make that clear. And also, just if I could ask one more question about some breaking news. You've probably seen that it's confirmed from both the Iranian and Israeli sides today that Evin prison, known to house many political prisoners as well as other prisoners in Tehran, has been bombed. Do you support the striking and targeting of such places which are not connected to the nuclear or ballistic programs? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As I said, I'm stepping in to lead this transition. I don't believe I need a title to play that role. The important thing is to be someone who can galvanize the nation, unite as much as possible the majority of democratically minded secular forces within the opposition and the political spectrum, as I mentioned. But most importantly, how can we, post-collapse, step into that phase of transition, working together, of course, with many elements who are in Iran today, who will be joining us in that effort to make sure that we can stabilize the transition phase. As in the past few hours, as you mentioned, 2 other targets were hit, which from the point of view of Iranians have been part of the regime's means of repression all along. The base of the IRGC, that has been always an element of repression, together, even though you might think it's symbolic, but it's very meaningful, the doors of Evin prison, without harming the prisoners inside, but basically tearing down a wall. And to me, Evin is a prison within a prison, a regime that has taken our countrymen hostage from day one. So I think Iranians are seeing that. I can imagine right now a political prisoner in Evin prison, what he thinks about that. Our time is coming. Finally, all these moments, all these movements that people have tried to fight and died for, fighting an unequal war against an extremely repressive regime, now the regime is even weaker than it was yesterday because two other instruments, one that incarcerates them, another one that strikes them, is being eliminated. I think these are things that are, in the view of our people, positive. And they know that this is not targeting our country, it's targeting our regime. Because the only war that matters here is the war that the regime is waging on the Iranian people. And we're talking about winning that war against them.
Hi, Melissa Bell, CNN. I'd like to ask you, you've said that the regime is collapsing. What do you think the role of the American strikes will be? Is there not a danger that they could unite the people behind a regime, however unpopular it is? And there's a lot of reporting to suggest that people are more clearly opposed at this stage to the war than they are to the regime.
Look, the greatest fear that Iranians today would have is a result of all this for the regime to still survive, because they know that the regime will lash out against them in vengeance. As a matter of fact, only in the last few days, the regime has already executed half a dozen people already on the guise of being spies or even being my supporters. The regime is ultimately what people fear the most. They want to make sure that at the tail end of all this regime actually collapses, which is what I mean by saying don't throw it another lifetime. This regime is on its way down. People know it. And the biggest fear is, what if this regime was to survive? That's why I keep saying this regime must go. The only solution for Iran's liberation and for peace is for this regime to be no longer there. This is an opportunity in front of us. So we are doing what we can as Iranians fighting this brutal regime. It is time for the international community to finally decide whether this time they're going to be with the people and help them overthrow this regime.
امیر حسین میر اسماعیلی هم از ایندیپندنت فارسی. والا حضرت آقای ترامپ دیروز در شبکه اجتماعی خودشون نوشتن عظمت را به ایران بازگردانید. خب همه ما میدونیم که این بازگشت به عظمت طبیعتاً منظورشون اشاره به دوران حکومت پادشاه فقید ایران پدر حضرت عالی داره. آیا این نوشته آقای ترامپ از دیدگاه شما به معنای حمایت از بازگشت شما به ایران در صورت تغییر رژیم و اینکه آیا شما و مشاورینتون با آقای ترامپ و دولت ایشون در ارتباط هستید؟ و سوال بعدی هم اینه که برخی از هموطنان ما در ایران نگرانن که نکنه این جنگ و درگیری ها تموم بشه و همچنان جمهوری اسلامی بمونه. نظر شما درباره این مسئله چیه؟ مرسی.
بخش دوم سوالتون رو اول پاسخ میدم که همین پاسخی بود که دادم که تنها نگرانی که باقی مونده برای همیهنانمون این نیست که آیا رژیم تضعیف شده و در حال از بین رفتنه. این که کاملا مشهوده. اما آیا ادامه این جریان باعث همچنان برپا موندن این رژیم خواهد بود یا نه؟ به همین دلیل هستش که به جامعه بین‌المللی میگوییم این رژیمی که در حال فروپاشی است رو بار دیگر یک طناب نجات براش نفرستید. نگذارید که ادامه نظام، ادامه این درگیری، ادامه این جنگ، ادامه تخریب کشورمون باشه. این یک فرصت طلایی است که اکنون دنیا داره و از هر زمان دیگری این فرصت برای همیهنانمون پیش اومده که تا به حال بر علیه رژیم بسیار سرکوبگر بایستی مقابله می‌کردن، ولی الان ابزار سرکوب رژیم تقریبا دیگه از بین رفته و این بهترین فرصته. و اما هر موضع‌گیری که یه رهبر سیاسی کشور دیگری در مقابل ایران میگیره بر اساس این هستش که ما همیشه گفتیم که تعیین سرنوشت و تکلیف آینده به دست مردم ایران خواهد بود. ما توقع نداریم از اینکه یک دولت خارجی بیاد و تعیین تکلیف بکنه برای ما. ما تنها چیزی که از اونها انتظار داریم این هستش که بدونن که جنگ اصلی ما با رژیمی است که مشکل رو نه تنها در مقابل مردم خودش ایجاد کرده بلکه برای جهان و از بین رفتن نظام هم به سود مردم ایران هست هم به سود جهان آزاد. اما آنچه که سرنوشت ایران رو تعیین خواهد کرد خود مردم ایران خواهند بود. برای همینه که روند تغییر دموکراتیک رو بر مبنای که نهایتاً یه رفراندوم ملی تعیین تکلیف خواهد کرد اون رو باز تقویت کنیم و اجازه بدیم که این مسیر دموکراتیک به درستی طی بشه.
Hello. I work for Europe One. Just one question. We have just learned that Israeli military strikes have hit Evin prison. What is your reaction about this strike?
I think I answered the question, but I will repeat my answer. This is yet another indication of how the regime and its apparatus of either incarceration or repression has been targeted. And the way people look at it is that another aspect of the regime means oppressing its own people is being neutralized, therefore opening even more opportunities for them at the right time to step in and move on the final initiative of overthrowing this regime. These are positive elements that the people see finally, the end is near, and gives them more encouragement that now we have a much better chance of succeeding because this regime no longer, every day is losing more of its apparatus of repression.
Thank you.
Feel free to ask your question in French as well if you're more comfortable. I can answer it in French.
Oui, bonjour, Stéphanie Pérez de France Télévisions. Justement, je voulais vous demander dans un premier temps de nous réexpliquer en français quelles seraient les grandes lignes de ce plan de transition dont vous nous parlez. Et dans un deuxième temps, j'aimerais savoir si vous avez estimé le soutien populaire dont vous pourriez bénéficier, parce que beaucoup d'Iraniens avec lesquels nous sommes en contact voient aussi en vous un allié d'Israël qui est le pays en ce moment qui les agresse.
Oui. Je pense que, comme je l'ai expliqué tout à l'heure, la seule guerre qui existe, c'est la guerre du régime contre sa propre population. Pendant 46 ans, ce régime n'a fait rien que pour, mener la main de fer contre notre propre concitoyen, pour pouvoir exporter une idéologie à travers le monde, soutenir à travers le terrorisme et la menace nucléaire. Tout ceci n'est pas l'option finale pour délivrer ce pays, non seulement en vue de liberté, mais aussi de stabilité et de paix régionale. Aujourd'hui, nous voyons que des pays qui ont été obligés de réagir contre la menace de ce pays ont dû prendre les mesures nécessaires, mais on voit très bien que les cibles ne frappent pas le peuple ou les intérêts nationaux, mais tout ce qui est les instruments de menace ou de répression du régime, notamment aujourd'hui même. Le site frappé de Basij, qui est, comme vous savez, un des éléments que le régime a toujours utilisé pour la répression intérieure, ainsi que une des structures de gardiens de la révolution à Téhéran aussi comme méthode de répression, la porte de la prison de Evin, comme vous savez, où se trouve la majorité de nos prisonniers politiques. Tout ceci montre que c'est ciblé envers l'affaiblissement du régime. Et l'interprétation nationale, ce n'est pas une guerre contre le peuple, mais c'est une guerre contre le régime qui est notre ennemi après tout. Et donc je pense que les Iraniens ne se sentent pas menacés comme si c'était une attaque comme à l'époque de Saddam Hussein où l'Iran est entré en guerre avec ce pays. Mais le fait que c'est encore une fois un élément qui équilibre une chance pour le peuple de réagir, parce que tous ces mouvements que nous avons eus, y compris le mouvement de Femmes, Vie, Liberté après le meurtre de Mahsa Amini, l'une des craintes était mais comment pouvons-vous, au-delà d'un certain stade, vraiment se soulever contre ce régime si de répression. Quand ils voient que tous ces éléments répressifs du régime et en même temps les régimes qui commencent à s'effondrer, c'est un élément qui leur donne espoir, qui leur donne courage, que finalement, après toutes ces victimes, avec tous ces sacrifices, nous allons finalement avoir une opportunité pour le soulèvement final.
Quand feu l'ayatollah Khomeini terminait ses discours et ses interviews, il avait toujours pour habitude de dire Amar Bar Shah, Marosha. Est-ce que vous, 46 ans après, vous dites Amar Bar Khomeini?
Non, les peuples disent Bar Khomeini est mort au dictateur. Mais pourquoi? Parce qu'ils savent très bien que l'ennemi est intérieur. L'ennemi n'est pas extérieur. Quand les Iraniens appellent à la chute du dictateur, ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire fin à ce régime. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes le plus proche possible à cet avenir, où cette dictature théocratique n'existerait pas, elle est en train de s'effondrer. Les éléments aux têtes du régime préparent déjà leur fuite. Et aujourd'hui, nous voyons que des éléments militaires, police, de sécurité, commencent à nous contacter. Ils ne veulent pas couler avec le navire qui est en train de couler. Ils veulent se rejoindre au peuple. Au lieu d'être devant ou contre le peuple, ils veulent se rallier au peuple. Donc les défections déjà commencent. Et j'ai indiqué dans mon discours que nous préparons déjà le mécanisme de communication. Tout ceci, c'est en vue de préparer, comme vous dites, le terrain dans cette phase actuelle jusqu'à la chute du régime, mais surtout, qu'est-ce qui va se passer pendant cette période de transition. Alors tout ce planning est effectué, vous entendrez encore plus dans les jours à venir, mais comment nous faisons exactement cette chose? Avec la coopération et collaboration des forces intérieures et bien entendu la mobilisation des forces au-delà du pays qui travaillent ensemble sur ce sujet. Et bien entendu au niveau international, quelle sorte de coordination pourrait exister avec des gouvernements clés et concernés?
Hi. Tim Ross from Politico.
Speak louder, please.
Tim Ross from Politico. So the United States Secretary of State and the government of Israel have both said that regime change is not a war objective. Would you like regime change to be a war objective, even if that means Israeli and potentially American troops fighting in the streets of Tehran?
My position has always been throughout the years that it is not any foreign government's mission or job or policy to define it as being regime change. The question, however, is for this government to recognize that this is the ask of the Iranian people. And in support of their liberal and democratic aspirations, where do particularly Western democracies stand? Are they going to continue to appease this regime and throw it another lifeline at the expense of the Iranian people? Or will they this time recognize that this is a golden and historic opportunity to put an end, on the one hand, for a regime that has repressed its own citizenry for its own benefit all these years, but also to put an end to any threat that this regime represents? If America or Israel had to respond under whatever threat, ultimately they have to recognize that by a change of regime, everything changes. So it's not that they need to advocate for regime change. It is that they simply have to recognize that regime change is the only ultimate solution, which is exactly why I'm here today and why we need to work together so that, A, we guarantee Iran and Iranians a democratic future, but also through that democratic future, it will give the world a sense of relief and trust that that element will lead to stability, to peace, and an end to any aspect that has been threatening and menacing the world and the region because of the nature of this regime.
شاهزاده سلام، نیلوفر پورابراهیم هستم. نیلوفر پورابراهیم هستم از ایران اینترنشنال. سوالم رو به فارسی میپرسم.
ممکنه خواهش کنم بلندتر صحبت کنید، صداتون نمیاد.
الان بهتره؟
بهتر شد.
سوال اولم در مورد نگرانی‌های بعضی از مردم در داخل ایرانه. وقتی که میگید که زمان فروپاشی نزدیکه یا به خیابون‌ها بیاین و مبارزه کنید، خیلی‌ها نگرانن و معتقدن که در شرایطی که زیر بمباران هستن و حتی راهی برای خبردار شدن از این حملاتی که داره میشه برخلاف مثلا اسرائیل ندارن. آیا این درخواست از اونها برای چنین چیزی درسته یا نه؟ گروه‌هایی که در واقع گروه‌های مثل گروه‌های چپ چنین سوال‌هایی رو می‌پرسن، انتقاداتی رو دارن. در مورد این خواستم اگر ممکنه توضیح بدید. سوال دیگه هم در مورد فعالیت‌هایی بود که امروز اعلام کردین، مثلا تشکیل کانالی که گفتید برای پیوستن کسانی که می‌خوان بپیوندن یا اجلاس اتحاد ملی که گفتین تشکیل میدین. چه کارهایی در زمینه اینها تا اینجا آغاز شده؟ چه زمانی طول می‌کشه تا به طور کامل انجام بشه؟ و آیا با دولت‌های غربی یا نمایندگانی در داخل کشورهای اروپایی و غربی در ارتباط هستید برای برنامه‌هایی که دارید برای کمک به مردم ایران و دقیقاً صحبتی که کردید برای اینکه اون نگرانی از ماندن جمهوری اسلامی به وجود نیاد یا این جلیقه نجاتی که میگید برای در واقع جمهوری اسلامی نفرستن؟
اول از همه بگم که شما درجه هوشمندی و هوشیاری همیهنانمون رو دست کم نگیرید. کاملا میدونن که چه زمانی میتونن حرکتی رو انجام بدن و طبعا در شرایطی که درگیری نظامی هستش خب بهترین فرصت برای این کار نیست، ولی زمانش خواهد رسید. آنچه که مسلماً دارن تشخیص میدن این هستش که تمام عوامل سرکوب نظام رو دارن کم کم در مقابل خودشون دیگر نمیبینند و این باز دوباره کمک میکنه به اینکه این فرصت فراهم بشه برای اون جنبش نهاییشون. در ارتباط با اون چیزی که اشاره کردید خب طبعا در روزهای آینده با جزئیات بیشتر نحوه عمل و برنامه‌هایی که در نظر داریم بیشتر مطرح خواهد بود برای رسانه‌ها و برای افکار عمومی و به طور کلی این برنامه‌ریزی رو داریم ادامه میدیم در جهت اون چیزی که امروز در سخنرانیم بهش اشاره کردن و نهایتاً در ارتباط با جامعه بین‌المللی من فکر کنم که در همین چند هفته اخیر کلاً دیدگاه و برخورد خیلی از دولت‌ها و یا سرانی که تا به حال اصلاً اصل این که شاید این رژیم تغییر پیدا کنه رو رادارشون نبود، اکنون می‌بینن که اتفاقاً این مسئله داره خیلی جدی‌تر از قبل مطرح میشه و دیگر مسئله فقط این نیست که خب این نظام هست بهتره باش تعامل بکنیم یا مماشات بکنیم، بلکه این نظام در حال فروپاشی است و اجباراً بایستی فکر بکنن که پس از این نظام چه اتفاقی خواهد افتاد و هم از روی کنجکاوی و هم از روی نگرانی وارد صحبت خیلی مستقیم‌تر از قبل با خود من یا تیم من و دیگران شده‌اند و به نظر من این بیشتر برای همیهنانمون در داخل میگم که بالاخره نه تنها صداشون رو بیشتر امروز داریم میرسونیم که به چه شکلی جهانیان میتونن در حمایت از مردم ایران و خواستشون کمکی باشن، ولی اون توجهی که تا به حال خیلی کمتر بوده امروز روز به روز داره مشهودتر میشه، به خصوص در این روزهای اخیر.
Monseigneur, de nombreuses chancelleries, notamment européennes, continuent de préférer la stabilité à la justice en disant qu'il ne faut surtout pas tenter de changer le régime. Comment expliquez-vous, or l'histoire prouve qu'il n'y a pas de stabilité éternelle sans un minimum de justice, comment expliquez-vous cette prudence, si l'on est optimiste dans les termes, ou cette complaisance, si on veut être un peu plus sévère?
Patrick, c'est pas du nouveau. On se connaît depuis qu'on se connaît. Presque plus de 40 ans, je dois dire. Mais qu'est-ce qui change, au fait? C'est le fait que, peut-être que jusqu'à présent, où on parlait d'une politique d'apaisement, en oubliant qu'il peut être une autre alternative, donc c'était le status quo, mais aussi le fait que ce n'est pas à un gouvernement étranger de décider s'il faut avoir un changement de régime. Il faut écouter un peuple qui réclame un changement de régime. Et à ce moment-là, en tant que des démocraties européennes ou américaines, qui parlent des droits de l'homme, qui parlent des libertés, qui parlent des injustices, qui parlent de tout cela, comment voulez-vous qu'une continuation de ce même régime puisse être la solution et d'être intimidé par la menace du régime, de ne pas avoir un dialogue ouvert avec les représentants de cette démocratie laïque contre un régime sanguinaire? Le déclic commence à se faire, finalement, surtout parce que, d'abord, ils voient que beaucoup de mes compatriotes, la grande majorité de mes compatriotes ne veulent plus de ce régime. Ils voient aujourd'hui que des éléments soi-disant réformateurs de hier n'y croient plus et sont en train de se joindre à nous dans ce mouvement de libéralisation, mais aussi le fait que, vu que les Iraniens sont prêts à ce changement, c'est un simple choix à faire. Est-ce qu'on fait obstacle à leur demande ou est-ce qu'on soutient leur demande? Ce n'est pas une politique à mener par un gouvernement étranger de réclamer un changement de régime, mais c'est d'acquiescer la demande d'un peuple qui veut être libéré et qui veut savoir si le monde libre est avec eux ou contre eux. C'est un simple choix à faire.
Thank you. Rob Hastings from the iPaper in the UK. Our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has called for de-escalation and has suggested that the UK would prefer to see a negotiated end to this current crisis. He hasn't spoken about regime change. President Macron has also distanced himself from the US strikes. Are you seeking to speak with European leaders like Keir Starmer, like President Macron? What would you say to them in the hope of convincing them to your belief that regime change is needed? And, I mean, they're not going to change overnight. Where do you see that process going of engaging European scepticism towards regime change?
First of all, I've been giving all these messages to world leaders everywhere for years now. And it's not that they don't know what I have to say or what my message is. What has changed, however, are the circumstances. And because the circumstances are now changing, in the sense that they visibly see the level of fragmentation of the regime and its mere collapse, which is very near, the fact that the regime is completely dismantled in its apparatus of repression that until now helped it sustain itself, and eliminating the greatest danger to a nation that unarmed are trying to, through civil disobedience and non-violence way, achieve their freedom. The playing field has now been equalized. My message remained the same as it was 20 years ago. But unfortunately, the truth is that because the pursuit of appeasement and the fear of a regime that takes hostages and intimidates Western governments to have an open dialogue with the force of democracy, they have always shied away and been fearful of talking to someone like me. I think this is changing now. I think we have much more receptive ears. What I would like to be able to do, given the opportunity, is to explain the mechanics of that change so they understand how we intend to do it, what we propose as an instrument, where can they, in fact, facilitate that or assist us. But this is more a discussion for the process. Right now, as we speak, let me point to a few issues that are imperative, where the world can immediately help us. It has nothing to do with talking about policy of regime change and all that. It has to do with empowering a nation seeking liberty. The regime is at war with its own people. It is trying to take revenge on the people, executing political prisoners, shutting down the internet, even landlines in the last few days. They are waging war against our own people. This regime's biggest fear is not an Israeli attack or an American response. It's the people themselves that they fear the most. This is what these world leaders have to recognize, that these are people who want to be with you, the free world, and the only obstacle between them and the free world is this regime. So don't be intimidated by the regime menace. Trust in a nation that wants peaceful relations with a neighborhood. They are not at war with Israel. They're not at war with the Arabs. They're not at war with America. The regime is a regime that has been chanting death to Israel and death to America for 46 years. The Iranian people say, we want to be friends with the world. We want to have cordial relations. It's up to you, world leaders, to recognize that potential, to trust the Iranian people in their intentions, and this is what will be the difference. This time, stay on the right side of history. You have an opportunity today. The worst thing that can happen is for this regime to continue to exist. It is on its way down. We just have to facilitate and expedite the process. So more harm is not done, not just to the Iranian nation, but everything that, as long as this regime continues to survive, it can still hurt a lot. We have this opportunity. This should be the agenda. Not only to eliminate this regime, but also to know that there is a plan for transition. It's not going to be chaos. It's not going to be unknown outcome. But for that, we need to be able to coordinate. So it is, I don't think it is anymore the question of whether or not or if there should be, but how can we make sure that this is a successful transition? And of course, there will be a need for very serious discussions as to how this or that country can, in a way or not, be effective in helping our cause and therefore guaranteeing our success, which is win-win at the end of the day.
Okay, last two questions. Channel 12 and then Hassan. I'm afraid that we've given a lot of time for questions. Thank you very
Hello, and thank you for being here today and for your courageous stance. I'm Elad from Israeli Channel 12. I wanted to ask you whether you're in contact with any Israeli officials or representatives, and how do you picture relations between the two countries in the day after the regime will be changed? And also, you've mentioned some of the previous attempts on to have a civil unrest to topple the regime that have been unsuccessful. What makes you optimistic that this time will be different? Thank you.
Well, first of all, my team has been, and myself in some cases, in contact with representatives of various governments. As you may know, 2 years ago I traveled to Israel. I met at the top level of leadership over there. There's an obvious understanding of the vision and what could be the future of a different Iran, and how does that play to what could be, unlike this regime, the future of our region. I mentioned the fact that we do have the Abraham Accords, which of course was sabotaged by the regime. I think we should elevate that to the Cyrus Accords, which includes Iran as a key player into that, and making sure that ultimately we finally have a neighborhood that is stable and at peace with one another. This is the vision, and I think this is a message that has resonated very well, at least regionally. But you're right, is this time different? It is different in the sense that, as I pointed earlier, we have had many uprisings in Iran, at least in the last decade. The last one being, of course, the Women Life Freedom Movement. And all those brave souls that have died in the process did not need to have a guarantee of success before they committed to it. They are still resilient. They will still continue fighting. But what's different this time? This time they see that the regime's instrument of repression and terror is being decimated, it's been neutralized, and they understand that this is not a war against them, it's against the regime itself. That in fact it is helping the Iranian people by neutralizing the regime's instrument that so far has been killing left and right our brave compatriots in all of these movements. And this time the Iranian people say, maybe we have a chance. Look, we have seen history many times and its ebbs and flows, right? But ultimately the Berlin Wall came down. The Soviet Union did collapse. The dissidents in those countries finally got their chance. I'm sure that Nelson Mandela or Lech Walesa could not do this at some point without some level of solidarity, not just as a labor movement in Poland, mind you, solidarity in the sense of the world coming to their assistance. And the Iranian people are not asking for anyone to do the job for them. All they are saying is that it will be far less costly for us to succeed if this time you are with us, as opposed to continue a policy of appeasement and throwing this regime another lifeline. Because what would the regime would do with this lifeline? It will retaliate, it will take revenge, it's already trying to do that. So for the sake of the Iranian people and for the sake of the world, we have this opportunity now. We will do whatever it takes as Iranians to fight that fight. But the world needs to consider that the consequence of that change will put an immediate end to all the threats that this regime has represented, whether it is the nuclear threat or terrorism or radical ideology spreading and how it's impacting Europe. We see it in many countries, and all of that can be reversed. Not only that, but beyond security and stability, economic opportunities. How can Iranians benefit from that? How can the world benefit from that? Because you are no longer dealing with a regime that is a mafia-like corrupt system that plunders our national resources at the expense of the Iranian people to spend it on nuclear programs or supporting its proxies in the region. If we talk about a national government, first and foremost concerned with the prosperity of its own country by means of creating all the opportunities, but also to tell the world Iran is as I said in my speech, is a huge potential for investment and growth, and that's also in the interest of the world. But you're not dealing with a corrupt mafia anymore. You're dealing with a country that is on terms with all the rules and regulations and principles of standard practice of business and what have you. That changes everything. This is, I think, what the world needs to be focused now. How can we make sure that this is the ultimate outcome? So we have a job to do, and I hope that through this dialogue and working beyond what we had to do as Iranians among ourselves, how can we communicate and explain to the world, this is how you can help us now, and in the long term, what opportunities will be created to the world. That's pretty much, I think, the course of action that we will see in the next few months. And of course, there will be much more for us to explain to all of you. But this is where we are at this stage.
Okay, last question. Kate from The Sun.
Thank you. Yes, Kate Davis from The Sun. How much of a threat does the Iranian regime pose in its current wounded state? Could we see them perhaps deploy a dirty bomb or even a hastily constructed nuclear weapon?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first part. Could you repeat your question, please?
So my question is, how much of a danger does the Iranian regime pose right now in its current wounded state? Could we see them perhaps deploy a dirty bomb or a hastily constructed nuclear weapon?
Well, as far as the existing infrastructure that the regime has had, clearly has been severely damaged or curtailed. But as I explained in my speech, just because you have struck the key areas of development or enrichment doesn't mean that the nuclear threat is gone. As I said, they can go and purchase it from the North Koreans, for example. The point is that the finger on the trigger is ultimately the menace. That as long as this regime continues to exist, we should not fall under the false premise that because we've hit or neutralized the nuclear enrichment plants or what have you, the threat is gone. For a while it may be. For a while it might have delayed it. But as long as this regime continues to exist, like a bad weed, it will keep popping up in your backyard. We need to make sure that it is completely eradicated. That's the ultimate guarantee, which is why now that we have this opportunity, now that the regime has been severely emasculated, if I could call it that, when the key instrument of repression and control and surveillance or whatever it is that a totalitarian regime utilizes against its own citizenry and as a menace to the world that is on the verge of collapse, recognize that this is a perfect window. Because I always said we should not jump to the conclusion that because diplomacy has failed, then we have to engage in conflict. I've always argued in all these years, many of you have heard me say that, why not the third way, which means the Iranian people are your alternative? You're not only limited to say, because we can't talk sense to them, we have to go and bomb the hell out of them. This is an opportunity to recognize that the regime is so weakened. Let's make the people of Iran the ultimate guarantee by investing on them, rather than hoping that through negotiations you can come to terms with a regime that it is in its DNA simply cannot comply with your expectation. We need to gravitate and have a shift of vision and strategy on that, and that's exactly what I begin to detect. I begin to detect more and more coming from governments that until now were just stuck on that status quo and are thinking finally that things can change. We have to be able to anticipate a change in Iran, and what do we need to do for that? That's, I think, for me, a positive development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.